will apologise for doing this by Zoom today, but of course, heavy fog and high winds have prevented planes from getting into St. John's. So until they get planes in, I won't be able to get to Ottawa. So I'm hoping to get there tonight, if at all possible. I thank everyone for their patience. I now call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 63 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting, of course, as you can see, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23rd, 2022. A reminder to all, please address your comments through the chair. Screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. In accordance with the committee's routine motion concerning connection tests for witnesses, I'm informing the committee that all witnesses that are or participants by Zoom have gone through all the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Before we proceed, we have one quick matter to attend to regarding our upcoming study of foreign ownership and corporate concentration of fishing licenses and quotas. The clerk has prepared and distributed a study budget for your review. If everyone agrees with the proposed budget, we need to adopt the following motion: that the proposed budget in the amount of $27,000 for the study of foreign ownership and corporate concentration be adopted. Is everyone in agreement, or is there some dissent? I'm seeing thumbs up.
Agree.
As far away as I am. So, okay, done and adopted. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on January 18th, 2022, the committee is resuming its study of the ecosystem impacts and the management of pinniped populations. I would like to welcome our first panel of witnesses. Representing the Arctic Research Foundation, we have Tom Henhofer, Chief Operating Officer, and Adrian Shumnowski, Chief Executive Officer. And representing Carino Processing Limited, we have Deon Dakins, Chief Executive Officer. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. You will each have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement. So we'll go to the Arctic Research Foundation first. I don't know if one is doing it or if you're splitting your time for the opening statement, but you have 5 minutes or less, please, starting now.
Good day, Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee. We would like to start by thanking you for this opportunity to speak on the important issues of ecosystem impacts and management of pinniped populations in Canada. The Arctic Research Foundation is a non-profit charity that enables and catalyzes community-led science and infrastructure projects in Canada. We work with communities to build networks of NGOs, universities, researchers, and governments to fund and deliver programming while providing access to ships, green energy-powered mobile labs, and other equipment. ARF is the only organization in Canada with a fleet of 6 fully equipped research vessels specialized in nearshore and uncharted marine areas. You can find this information on our 3 large ships in Appendix B. Our work is wide-ranging from hydrographic mapping to ecological map monitoring, to food security innovation, to transporting Indigenous community members to harvesting grounds where elders can pass traditional knowledge on to youth. We have a great deal of experience working in the Arctic, Atlantic, and Pacific waters, and working with Indigenous hunters, trappers, and fishers who are directly impacted by the government policies on fisheries and ocean mammals such as pinnipeds. Throughout this committee's study, several witnesses have noted gaps in data on pinniped populations, their diets, their broader impacts on ecosystems. Representatives from DFO itself admitted significant knowledge gaps to this committee. This is consistent with what we have heard in our consultations with communities and researchers, and we have seen on the ground during our operations. I'd like to quote Jackie Jacobson, an Inuk leader in Tuktoyaktuk, Northwest Territories, MLA for Nunavut, and a member of ARF's board. In Husky Lake, seals are killing trout, so if we see a seal, we shoot it. But there is complete lack of resources for scientific studies, and we don't know the population numbers. We just know that the fish aren't biting. I'd like to now turn it over to Tom Henhofer to continue.
Thank you. Jackie's sentiment is similar across the regions where we work, but there is a much larger problem that needs addressing. Scientific and environmental knowledge gaps have become endemic in the Arctic. There is a dangerous lack of waterway and floodplain mapping, a poor understanding of beluga health in the Beaufort Sea, a shortage of studies on ice freeze and breakup in Great Slave Lake, and a broad lack of research into microplastics contamination and invasive fish species, to name just a small fraction of issues facing Arctic marine science. These challenges are compounded by the fact that scientific research is far more expensive in the Arctic than in the South. But DFO and the federal government at large continue to underfund this critical work. To give one example, our largest ship is the research vessel Nahidak 2. It is the only full-sized research vessel dedicated to Great Slave Lake, the Mackenzie River, and the Beaufort Sea. This year, for the third year in a row, it will be staying in dry dock due to a lack of federal investment in marine science. This is despite ARF subsidizing its operations with $1 million of our own core funds and calls from the region's hunters and trappers committees for proper federal science funding. Moving back to pinnipeds, Canada lacks a clear picture on the extent of the damage they cause throughout our waters. What is clear, however, is that the issue is being exacerbated because DFO has not been conducting fulsome fish stock assessments in much of Canada. The department, it announced it was completely cancelling fall fish stock surveys in certain regions last year, for example, and has consistently failed to properly assess stocks in most of the Arctic. This is a triple shot of dangerous lack of funding for these studies. The most recent stock assessments on DFO's websites are from 2020. Of the 180 stocks listed, 21 are from the Central and Arctic. Only 3 species are categorized as healthy, cautious, or critical. The remaining 18 are listed as uncertain. So only 3 of 18 of these fish species are actually able to be categorized. This lack of knowledge is unacceptable and unnecessary. A core part of assessments in their current form is trawling with large vessels and massive nets. This process is expensive and environmentally damaging, but proven technologies exist that can get the same or better results done at a minimal cost and with minimal environmental impact. For years, Scandinavian countries have been using bioacoustics mapping equipment, similar technology to that found in fish finders and the hydrographic equipment used to map seabeds, to effectively conduct fish stock assessments. We use this kind of equipment on our ships every day, and the methods for adapting them to stock assessments have been proven effective in other jurisdictions. These surveys could be made even more accurate while also providing meaningful employment to local fishers by ground truthing through small-scale trawling from low-cost local boats. Our recommendations are that the federal government immediately create a pilot project for fish stock assessments using bioacoustics equipment and local trawling where appropriate, increase investment in Arctic marine science to match investments in the rest of the country, add a northern top-up to grants for marine science in the Arctic that reflect the increased expense of operating ships in that region, meaningfully engage local fishers, hunters, and trappers, and Indigenous wildlife stewards in wildlife management strategies, and to continue to place more power in the hands of northern communities by ensuring they are able to direct how Arctic science grants are spent. We have the ships, the technology, the methods, and the expertise to solve one major aspect of the pinniped problem by resuming fish stock assessments in an affordable, minimally invasive way. The other issues we've mentioned have similar solutions, although we don't have the time to fully address them in this forum. But what they do all have in common is the need for action from the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you. A little bit over, but I wanted to make sure we heard enough of the statement. We'll now go to Mr. Dakins, representing the Carino Processing Limited, for 5 minutes or less, please.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. Carino has been processing seal meat, oil, hides, and other byproducts since 1958. We need a stable supply of harp, hooded, and grey seals. The health of our business is intimately linked to the healthy seal populations, particularly harp seal populations. If we genuinely care about seals, we must come to grips with an increasingly glaring and alarming truth. Responsible management of this ever-growing seal population is essential to protect our ocean ecosystem and the species that inhabit our waters, and to conserve and protect the seal itself. We must dispel the myth that a responsible and humane seal harvest threatens the seal's sustainability. In fact, the seal harvest is an environmental necessity for the long-term health of the seal herd and the species on which it preys. We must treat all species as equally important. To sacrifice one to protect another is both misguided and irresponsible. DFO's own science makes clear that at their current numbers, grey seals will cause the extinction of 4 commercial fish species, in the southern Gulf of St. Lawrence. The ecosystem cannot survive this kind of imbalance, nor can the seals. We must restore the balance. In 2002, the harp seal fishery was the first in Canada to adopt the precautionary approach to fisheries management. This means management decisions must err on the side of caution when scientific knowledge is uncertain. It also means not using the absence of adequate scientific information as a reason to postpone action or failure to take action to avoid serious harm to fish stocks or their ecosystems. This approach is widely accepted internationally as an essential part of sustainable fisheries management. And yet, for years, we have used that absence of adequate scientific information to deny the devastating impact of historic seal numbers on commercial fish stocks and the marine ecosystem off our coasts. Existing DFO harp seal science tells us that since the population has risen above 5.4 million, females on average are 20 kilos lighter in February, a critical point in the gestation cycle, and 1.7 centimeters shorter in body length. Females are on average 2 years older before they have their first young. Late-term abortions are up 200%. Furthermore, ice-dependent seals like harp seals are more susceptible to the effects of climate change when their populations are higher. At current numbers, grey seals will cause the extinction of 4 commercial fish species in the southern Gulf of St. Lawrence. The 2022 report of the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team told us the food, feeding, and migration data for the harp and grey seal populations in Atlantic Canada is woefully inadequate to accurately determine the role seals play in the Northwest Atlantic ecosystem. The lack of current comprehensive data collection on feeding, diet, and migration throughout the seasonal and spatial range of seals, especially the harp seal population, is likely contributing to the lack of credible scientific information. The high population abundance of grey seals and harp seals, which are at or approaching historic levels, are having serious impact on the ocean ecosystems in Atlantic Canada. The extent of the impacts cannot be determined with the limited information held by DFO science. Based on caloric requirements, Norwegian science estimates that harp seals consume 3.3 metric ton of fish per year. DFO estimates 1.1 metric ton of fish per year. In Canadian waters, the herd consumes somewhere between 8.36 and 25.08 million metric tons of fish each year. Commercial fisheries, all coasts of Atlantic Canada, including northern waters, yields less than 750,000 tons. Regardless of who is right, such ravenous and continuous predation by seals is threatening fish stocks. There's an urgent need to review the Norwegian and Canadian estimates, including the underpinning science, and reconcile the difference. Inuit elders have told me personally that harp seals are displacing the ring seal in traditional areas, negatively impacting food security and the health of individuals. At our plant, we are seeing claw marks in young beater harp seals. Our quality control experts believe the females are trying to wean the pups earlier than historically normal. Harp seals need sea ice to reproduce, ice that is threatened by climate change. In 2016, scientist Gary Stenson et al. Authored an article, The Impact of Changing Climate and Abundance on Northwest Atlantic harp seal. It states the general decline in pregnancy, including the rate of late-term abortions, is associated with increased population size. As well, harp seals appear to respond to relatively small variations in environmental conditions when they are at high population levels. It follows that reducing harp seal population numbers will actually improve their odds of surviving the impacts of global warming and climate change. Bringing balance to our ecosystem serves the interests of all the various entities dependent on its survival, including the seals. But we must act, and now. Thank you for the opportunity to shed some truth on this critically important issue.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens. We'll now go to our first round of questions, and I'll go to Mr. Small for 6 minutes or less, please.
He's on mute. He never sounded so good.
Mr. Small? We can't hear you, Mr. Small. This, Christine, can I go to somebody else while Mr. Small is trying to straighten out his connection?
Just wondering if perhaps, Mr. Small, is there a mute button on your headset? Or on the cord?
Okay.
Yeah, getting you now. It's the quietest time I ever seen you, Mr. Small. So you start off now when you're ready, please. 6 minutes or less.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. And thank you. And thank you to the witnesses for taking the time out of their busy schedules to become a part of our study here. My first question, Mr. Chair, is to Mr. Dakin. Mr. Dakin, what's the number one factor that prevents us from redeveloping the sealing industry and taking the existing quotas that we have?
From our perspective, it's about the market access linked to our products. If we had unfettered access to an adequate number of markets, we believe we could reestablish the trade. And underpinning that, I think the necessity here is to understand what is the magnitude of the situation in terms of the sustainability of fish stocks and the sustainability of the seal herd itself. There are indications that seals themselves are no longer able to maintain the population growth and health that it presently has if it's allowed to continue to go unchecked.
Okay, again, Mr. Dakins, you mentioned the discrepancy between Norwegian science estimates on the amount of fish consumed by harp seals and the estimates by Canadian science. There's a large unknown mortality in northern cod. Do you think that DFO science is deliberately downplaying the effects of harp seal predation?
I won't make a claim that it's deliberately being done, but I think there's, as the other testimony provided there, I think there's gaps in the science. I think we need to invest more in science to understand what are the real interactions. We don't know if we're talking about an elephant in a room or a herd of elephants in the room. We have not invested enough to understand the interactions between particularly harp seals and cod stocks in aggregating areas.
So, again, Mr. Dakins, we know that harp seals are kept in captivity and studied in St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador by DFO. They know how much these sedentary seals are fed. If these seals were in the wild, fending for themselves and completing their thousands of kilometers migration per year, they need to consume way more than they're being fed currently. Do you know how much these adult harps consume each year?
I visited the Marine Science Center in 2008 with Dr. Pierre-Yves Daou, who was the veterinarian that helped us reshape the marine mammal regulations for the three-step process. At the time, I asked the caretaker how much each of these adult seals was eating. He was very proud to inform me that he had returned the seals to a healthy body weight from the previous care of the earlier caretaker, who had been feeding them in excess of 3 metric tons of pelagic species per year. So that's whole fish down the throat of the seal. Doesn't account for any belly biting or discard. So at that time, the seals had grown to obese proportions where they couldn't even get out of the pool anymore. The new caretaker cut the seals back to 2.2 metric tons of fish per year to achieve a healthy body weight for a seal in captivity. We presently use 1 metric ton as the number that seals eat in Canadian waters. For yet, we encourage the ASSTT to review that data, and we're not able to access it. There's a real question on my behalf about the sincerity to evaluate the numbers that we presently have at hand. We know, I'm pretty sure anybody here who has a pet, they know how much they feed it per week, per month, per year. I'm pretty sure we'd know what we feed those harp seals in the swimming pool down in Logie Bay.
So you mentioned about lower body weights and smaller sizes and miscarriages and things that indicate that, do you think that's indicating that the seals are underfed in the wild and that it's the beginning of mass starvation of the herds?
Well, the DFO science itself says it's linked to availability of prey and the size of the herd. All those facts and figures, they come from DFO science. And the alarming one is the late-term abortions, that they're up 200%. A female harp seal, based on her body condition, can decide at any point through the gestation period to abort. And that's what they're doing. They are aborting in young females because they're underweight and they're shorter in body length. And the claw marks that we're seeing in the young of the year seals that we harvest are ever increasing. And again, our experts who do the grading in the plant believe it's because the mothers are trying to wean the pup off earlier, perhaps because she doesn't have enough body weight to wean them through the whole cycle.
How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair?
Just under a minute.
Okay, thank you. To the folks in the Arctic Research Council, Mr. Hennifer or Mr. Shanowski, do you think that the ability of DFO to fall back on the precautionary approach is allowing DFO to not work harder to show the predatory effects of pinnipeds?
I don't think there's any question that DFO is working very hard. We work very closely with DFO scientists in most of the work that we do. The problem is a lack of funding. They don't have the funding to do the work that needs to get done, plain and simple. There needs to be more money put into it. I have emails here, and I won't say from whom, but from a number of different DFO scientists saying that they basically had to scrape and scrimp and to do the science that has already been done, that there hasn't been federal funding for that. They've had to find outside funding sources. So there's a real problem with their ability to get the work done, plain and simple. Not for lack of trying, not because they're covering it up. These are good, hard-working scientists who want to do good science, but they just don't have the funding to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Small. We'll now go to Mr. Henley for 6 minutes or less.
I'm going to start to continue make questions with our Arctic Research Foundation witnesses. So thank you very much for appearing today. And I am my constituency is the Yukon, so I do have an interest in Arctic issues, of course, as given my region. And I first would like to know just a little bit more about your organization and the history and partners in the north, and also your relationship with DFO, just maybe continuing basically on what you were just talking about.
Yeah, so Arctic Research Foundation is deeply rooted in working with communities in the north. We have 5 or 6 research vessels that are stationed throughout the Arctic. And we rely closely with the communities on developing research programs. So whether it's supporting DFO researchers in that region, universities, we look at it as a layered of many organizations. We approach our research vessels almost like Mars rovers. If we are working in an area, we're going to cover as much ground as possible. Whether it's hydrographic or search research, fisheries research, oceanographic research, we layer everything so we get as much information as possible because it's expensive to operate in that region.
And really what we do differently is nearshore work and work in uncharted waters. You might have heard of us because we were the organization that helped find the Franklin expedition. And our ships, you need that kind of small Mars rover ship. The big icebreakers can't get into these areas. They can't get into the ecologically sensitive areas where lake water, river water meets the ocean, where Inuit and northern indigenous people actually hunt and fish and are going after seals. That can only be done with shallow draft vessels that are specialized to operate in riskier areas. And we're the only organization, as far as we know, that provides these ships. And yet we don't get a penny of federal government funding at the moment. And one of our main ships is not running this year in Great Slave Lake, the Mackenzie River, and the Beaufort Sea, which means that science work that needs to be done there, one of the two very important marine protected areas are in the Beaufort Sea, and the local hunter-trapper organizations and the communities desperately want work done there. They especially want bathymetry and they want stock assessments because they're worried that when the quotas revert, that it's going to devastate their fishing industry. So those are some of the areas where we work and some of the really pressing issues that we've seen.
Thank you. And I wonder, so it sounds like lack of funding to DFO itself for its work in the north, but also funding to partner or potential partner organizations like yourself. So, do you see this as a kind of a lack of focus on the north versus the other coasts, or is it part of a more general overall lack of funding?
Yeah, absolutely. A lack of focus on the Arctic. I mean, look at Great Slave Lake is ecologically one of the most important places in this country. It's the canary in the coal mine, and it's extremely productive in terms of animals and that's where you go to find out how fresh water is flowing into the Arctic. And yet, you look at Lake Winnipeg, Lake Ontario, they've been studied to death. But Great Slave Lake is barely mapped at all. Our most recent research vessel that we just deployed is in Great Bear Lake, and it's the first research vessel in Great Bear Lake, period. That there's been no studies done there. And this is just on inland lakes. This isn't even getting into the ocean. We have studied lots of the kind of traffic ways through the Northwest Passage. Those are well charted with the big icebreakers doing that work. But that's not where people are out fishing and hunting. And that's not where, you have the mixing of the sediment from the different regions. It's critically understudied, and a big part of the reason why we've been successful is that our work is 5 to 20 year cycles, long term, and not just kind of go in for a year or 2, 3, and see what happens. You need to have that long-term, stable research in order to really get useful information, and that's really challenging under the current funding models.
Thank you. And recognizing that the time is going fast, but what can you tell me about, or tell the committee about the relationship between pinnipeds and fish stocks in the north? I know you have a lack of data, but is there anything you can tell based on either stories or research that you do have?
Well, we are not research scientists, but we work closely with the communities, and we listen to the hunters and the trappers. And often what we see is you are what you eat. So hunters are seeing different types of fish, fish being replaced by shrimp. The size, and mentioned earlier, the size of the seals are different. They're sinking when they're supposed to be floating when they're hunted. So connecting with the community, listening to the people who are on the ocean, who are in the rivers, who are on the land, they see the sudden abrupt changes. They see the changes in climate change. They see the changes in migrations. What we really need to do is layer that traditional knowledge, that knowledge on the ground, equally with research opportunities, infrastructure. And it can't be just a snapshot research. It has to be a total ecosystem way of managing. But snapshot pictures are a way of the past. It just doesn't work. So we have to look at that ecosystem as a whole. The people who live in the north, the communities, are an important part of that ecosystem, just like all of we are now. The seals, the fish, there's balance. We don't see the balance changes, but the people in the north do. So involving true meaningful programs will create that different focus in research.
And if I could just add on very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Hanley. We're running out of time, a little bit over. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
You're very interesting witnesses because you have provided us with very precious information of the extreme situation Over the weekend, I was talking to a friend of my dad who was with a filmmaker who is now a documentary filmmaker and was undertaking research on the realities of the Saint Laurent, the fact that the beluga whales are on the decline and that we don't have cod there anymore, and that there are diverse species that are also feeding on small fish that we used to find before. And that's a problem in Quebec. And I realize that it's relatively the same observation we are seeing in the north. And we've also heard the same narratives that we're hearing in Quebec. No one is listening. Fisheries and Oceans doesn't seem to be taking seriously the urgent needs you have to perfect your observations and your relations with people on the ground. And I feel that people on the ground have real knowledge. And I think that that's what we've been missing over the past 25 years. My father used to say, forget about courts, we'll never see courts again because of the seals. But people on the ground, that's the kind of knowledge they have. And this is something that we seem to be lacking. For how long have you felt that your resources are on the decline when compared to the research needs, the increased needs for your work versus the drop in resources? For how long has this gone on?
Really, thank you for the question. It's always been a serious problem. We've very rarely had any federal government funding. That's why we work together to create networks, universities, territorial governments, provincial governments, and federal departments when we can to create good research programs. But every year it's a scramble to kind of stack enough programs together so that we don't lose too much money that would jeopardize the foundation. I mean, we're a nonprofit charity. You know, we lose funds in the delivery of our work. That's fine. We're not here to make a profit. But what I think the biggest issue is it's not so much about how long as it is what's happening right now. And the federal government has made a lot of big funding announcements in terms of science going out in science funding going out in the Arctic, which is excellent. And we were very hopeful as a result of that our ships were going to be kind of fully booked this season. But when we went to the community members on the ground, because the fund flows through the communities as it should a lot of the time. They wanted to do, for instance, hydrography in the marine protected area near Paulatuk and Tuktoyaktuk. But there wasn't enough, despite there being enough money in what was announced to do that kind of work. The money that was actually flowing isn't available yet and might not be available for several years. It's expensive to run ships in the north. To do marine science, you need ships. And most of the science that needs to be done is in nearshore regions. We're the only organization that can provide those ships, and yet we're constantly struggling to build the programs together through whatever different buckets are available in order to do it. So it's a constant problem that we're hoping is going to get better, but it does require serious, increased long-term investment, and as Adrian said, a whole of ecosystems approach. That's part of the other issue is, just very briefly, we're successful because we work under the cogeneration of knowledge framework. The communities lead and we follow, and we take a whole of ecosystem approach in our work. That's really hard to fund when you're going to ISED or DFO or Agriculture Canada or whomever else looking for funding. Everything is very specific, you know, in terms of what the research is going to be, what's going to come out of it. That doesn't work well in a northern framework where we need to learn more about the ecosystems more broadly. So even though our model works, it's very hard to get it funded under the current federal funding regime.
I'll go on maybe with Mr. Dawkins. Is there a section that regularly presents reports to Fisheries and Oceans scientists? Because you've presented a very interesting picture of the situation. So are you heard? Are you taken into consideration?
Well, I serve on the Atlantic Seal Advisory Committee, the ASAC, which is chaired by DFO. And what I will say is that for the better part of 2 decades, industry has been sending strong signals to DFO about the precautionary approach and the overall management regime. What is our mandate as Canada with respect to pinnipeds, whether it's on the West Coast or on the East Coast? We've got scientific proof that the gray seal is going to extinct 4 species. And we're sitting here not accepting the responsibility to implement measures to rectify that. This is a shared problem with the Americans. The Americans have been talking to us. I've spoken to numerous people down in Nantucket through Maine. They are frustrated with the Canadian seals coming down and eating the American fish. And the only level of engagement that we get is a request to find out if we can use seal and bait and potential fallout from the MMPA. I think we have to take the responsibility now for future generations, definitely to tie in with the local observations of the people who are out in the environment, whether it's in the north or on the East Coast. They see what's happening. They saw the cod collapse coming long before DFO saw it. And we need to incorporate that firsthand experience into the management model. We need to take the responsibility to rectify the imbalance that's been created in our ecosystem. This is not unheard of in other jurisdictions or areas. You could look to Australia and what they've done with the kangaroo. In the case of desertification, loss of land, the rangelands were going to be destroyed. And it's an education approach to letting the rest of the world know that if you stand for banning the use of this sustainable resource, you're actually against the environment. You are against the world. They're putting people in marginal positions where they're destroying tradition and culture. They're impacting the food security of the local people. They're not respecting the rules around convention and biological diversity. There are a number of buttons that could be pressed, levers that could be pulled, dials that could be turned in order to help rectify and restore the balance in the ecosystem, because we now have an ecosystem problem. This is not about a commercial seal fisheries. This is about restoring balance and saving the planet, saving the Northwest Atlantic ecosystem.
Thank you, Madam Debian. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I have so many questions. I was having a hard time deciding which ones would be most important for today, to be honest. I think my questions first, I'd like to ask a little bit more to you through the chair, Mr. It's Dakins, is that right? So one of the biggest things that we're talking about is the lack of the information that we need so that we can ensure that we're all talking about the same things, that we have the education so that, misinformation can be countered. And so I'm just trying to get clarification. So now this is what I think our 5th meeting around pinnipeds, and I'm starting to notice some information that's not jiving. So I just wanted to get some clarification around the diet of seals. So I keep hearing about the amount of food that's being eaten by seals in Norway, and then using that as a comparison of the inaccuracies of what we are seeing around what seals are eating along Canadian coasts. But I'm also learning that there is differences in the environments that would result in those different eating habits. And can you speak to that a little bit so that we can understand? Because if we're saying that we need to reconcile the differences, I think, perhaps I'm wrong, but there seems to be an assumption that our numbers of what seals are eating along the coast of Newfoundland, for example, would be the same of what's being eaten along the coast of Norway. And some of the information I'm getting now is showing that that's not necessarily two comparable numbers to be looking at. So perhaps you could clarify for me the information that you were talking about specifically around that, please.
Yeah, well, I think it's about reconciling the difference, because being out by a kilo a day is an astronomical amount of biomass removed from the environment. The Norwegian number is based on the caloric requirements for a harp seal in the wild which do swim some 15,000 kilometers each per year. We've got that data from DFO. We've seen that they go up to the eastern coast of Greenland and back. We know that harp seals now are showing up in rivers and eating char in places where they never were before. Like any problem we have in our lifetime, the first thing you need to do is define it. And we haven't defined the problem. We've got pockets of science here, and I think one thing we could all agree on is that immediately a gap analysis be conducted. What do we know? What is the strength of that data? What do we not know? Invite dialogue with other countries that are challenged with the same problem that we are. Abundance of pinnipeds and impacts on fisheries is not solely a Canadian problem. This has been experienced through everywhere where pinnipeds exist. And I think until we desensitize the topic, we won't get to even being able to scrape at the question that you're asking, because what people in the environment are seeing, and certainly I don't spend the majority of my time out there, but I talk to people every day who are out there. They're seeing a lot of crab being eaten. They're seeing a lot of shrimp being eaten that doesn't really provide a lot of benefit to harp seals in its consumption. Dr. George Rose would have said it's the equivalent of eating popcorn. Why are they eating so much shrimp? And again, I'd like to come back to the situation in the southern Gulf of St. Lawrence. We know the gray seal is going to extinct 4 species, and we are not responding. Okay. This is my 4th committee now I've sat through, and we've seen recommendations that have not been implemented.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens. That's helpful information. I'm just trying to make sure that at the end of this, we have the most sound recommendations possible for us to be able to put forward to the government for us to move forward with, because I think one of the biggest challenges that we have, which is coming up over and over and over again, is the gaps in data, the gaps in information. So I'm wanting to make sure that the information that we're receiving is clear in time for the recommendations coming forward. Another, and I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate here in information that's coming my way. Another thing that's coming up is around the fact that if we look at an ecosystem-based approach when we're looking at pinniped harvesting, which is, I agree with so much of what's being said, to be clear, but the importance of us looking at not only what pinnipeds are eating, but sort of the part that pinnipeds play in there, in looking at it more holistically. And I'm wondering, perhaps this could be a question to our witnesses through the Arctic Research Foundation. Any thoughts on, I know you work closely with Inuit and so on, around the importance of sustainable ecosystem-based approach in the decisions that we make on how to best move forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important to remove that snapshot type science. So traditionally, when there's open water, you're doing research. But the ice in between the seasons is so critical and probably more productive than just open water. So if you involve programs that involve communities, research teams, commercial groups, where you have year-round, not just one month a year, you'll get a better picture of what's really happening and studying the ecosystem. You need to understand migration patterns, how far the animals are going, but not just the migration patterns specifically of the seal, but what about the food they're eating? How are those what are the fish doing? Where are they migrating? Where are the breeding grounds for shrimp? Because opportunistically, the seal are going to be looking for where the food's easiest to get to. Some areas, they may be it might be all shrimp. Other areas may be more commercial influenced. But if you have a snapshot, you're never really going to know. If you have that throughout the year, it also creates an industry, an opportunity for communities where capacity can be built to support that type of research. And then you have true traditional knowledge, co-production design programs that have meaning for industry, for researchers, but mainly for the communities in the north. So a balance is required, and I see that's the only way of doing it, to create that balance, to understand that balance in the ecosystem.
If I could add on.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. Thank you, Ms. Barron. As we ran a little bit over time, I have to go now to Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes or less, please.
Great. I'm looking to get 6 minutes since the last one went 6 minutes. So, Mr. Szymanowski, I'm fascinated by something you said, and perhaps you could explain to the committee why it's happening. You said that when seals are being hunted in the north, they're sinking. Can you explain to the committee why?
We are what we eat. So for some reason, the seal are not as big as fat as what they used to be. Some areas, the seal are mainly focusing on shrimp. Popcorn, it's like eating popcorn. So the shrimp are not as nutritious, not as fatty, so the seal don't have that energy. So literally when the hunters are hunting them, the seal are sinking.
So for years, DFO would say, scientists would say they're not finding the bones of cod when they do the stomach contents in the East Coast because, of course, what keeps them fat is they go after the organs. They go after the liver and the organs. So in the absence of that kind of fatty diet, they're eating whatever else they can find. Is that right?
That'd be a safe assumption, yeah.
Right. And what effect is that having on the other stocks?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think we have enough research to be able to understand what that is. That's when you have to look at the ecosystem totally and look at the fish migrations, the food sources, changes in water temperature, global warming, rising water temperatures. We know it's happening faster in the Arctic. You can talk to the local community. They can say over and over again the changes and how quick that is. So we don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Dakins. In 2021, the DFO's lead assessment biologist, Dr. Dwyer, who you may be familiar with, said that seals are not having any discernible impact in their predation on the pelagic fish. Then, a year later, the minister came out and said seals eat fish, and obviously there needs to be more study. Is the reason the minister thinks there needs to be more study is because Dr. Deakins is saying they aren't having an impact, or is it something else?
Well, I think the minister's announcement came on the heels of the Atlantic Seal Science Task Team report, which I gave 3 quotes from. I mean, we know that our scientific data is woefully inadequate to determine what role negative or positive harp seals are having in the local environment. Our recommendation would be is that we immediately strike a task team, a task force, an action group, a group of people who are going to sit down and actually work to pore through this, come up with ways to collect more data, analyze the data, and respond with urgency to what I believe is potentially the collapse of the Northwest Atlantic because of overpredation.
But is it really that in the East Coast anyway? I understand in the North there probably hasn't been a lot of science, but in the East Coast there's been a lot of science. I mean, there was a Royal Commission on Seals in 1986. There was the Fisheries Resource Conservation Council established in 1993, which did extensive studies on seals, called in 1999 for the seal population to be half of what it is today, and of course what it was then. Of course, it's almost double the size then. There have been, as you say, numerous committee reports here that have studied it, 4 or 5 at least. There is science that came out on gray seals last year from DFO scientists saying exactly what you said, that we're going to see the loss of species in the Gulf. I myself have 122 pages of DFO seal stomach samples that I got through an access to information request or an order paper request. And DFO at the Atlantic Mackerel Advisory Committee put out a slide that showed that 50% of what gray seals are eating in the winter is mackerel, of all things, which weren't supposed to be here in the winter, and 80% is cod and herring in the summer. Isn't there enough science to determine that we need fewer seals?
Mr. Perkins, you're perhaps one of the most knowledgeable people on this issue now in Canada. You're in the top 2% for sure. You've taken the time to read the studies. What Canada needs to do is synthesize this into a package that we can use to promote the severity of the problem. Yes, we have a lot of data, but the ASSTT, who was struck by this government, we need to follow the recommendations. It says it's inadequate to fully understand. So this is a go forward. I don't think we have time to waste. There's a recommendation to cull 70,000 gray seals from 2012. We haven't taken
Anything.
We haven't taken 10,000 out of the environment in that period of time, in
If I could
over
just
11
get
years.
one more question, and you mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Thank you, Mr.
We only have
Perkins.
4
Your
minutes.
5 minutes are up. And I know you did comment on somebody having 6 minutes in the first round. Well, that's the length of time that we questioners get in the first round. Second round is 5 minutes starting off. And we'll now go to Mr. Kellaway for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to have this panel together. And the study has been quite illuminating, and a lot of common themes have come up. And then there's some interesting contrasting comparisons that I'll get to in a few seconds. But, Dion, I want to go to you. You mentioned market access as an issue. And, we've seen over the last 20 years different governments try different things. The Harper government tried to strengthen trade ties to China. That didn't necessarily work out too well. Recently, our government announced the Indo-Pacific strategy to diversify Canada's trade across the Indo-Pacific. So I'm going to drill down a little bit here on market access. What would further trade opportunities across the Indo-Pacific mean for the seal industry? That's number one. And I want to go back to science for a second, because we've had a lot of folks here at the committee talk about science. Some folks saying that we have enough science. And so I want to drill down a little bit with you on this in terms of what I'm hearing you saying is we need to, do a gap analysis on science. So I want to tie the science into market access. So how can science help with market access?
Throughout Asia, even recently, we've tried to advance trade and open up new customers. We're presently in the world's most opportune time for selling omega-3s. The collapse of the fisheries in South America, the Chilean and Peruvian fisheries, have created a global shortage. We've been inundated with requests about seal oil omega-3 since going back to March. The problem is, in a lot of these countries, the decision makers believe that harp seals are endangered. That's a real message that the animal rights groups and other detractors have pushed forward. We need to be able to counter that. The only way we can counter it is with the science. Do the gap analysis. I don't understand. DFO could undertake that immediately. Talk to the Norwegians, reconcile the differences in our understanding, and that will provide the basis with which we will understand the problem. Then we'll understand the urgency to address that problem. And if the rest of the world wants to buy Canadian seafood, then they're going to have to come to a reality that we have to do something with this apex predator. Not only the harp seal, the gray seal, and on eastern and western northern waters.
Thanks. I want to stay with you on this if I can. So in your, not sure if it was in your testimony or your last series of answers to questions, you spoke of an action team. So when you look at this particular issue on seals, there's a lot of themes that come up. Lack of access to markets. You have the MMPA in the States. We also are hearing that there are other fishers in parts of the United States that are struggling with the same issues that our fishers are doing, which leads me to believe that we should be, I wish we could travel and meet with some of these folks on the ground, on the water, to get their thoughts. But I want to go back to the action team. So from a governmental perspective and working with NGOs and working with fishers and fishing associations and businesses like yours, it seemed to me that if you're looking at an action team, who would be on that action team? Obviously DFO, right? Global Affairs, Trade. Who else is on this action committee? And what are the 2 or 3 things that are low-hanging fruit? Maybe it's the gap analysis that we can look at, not in 6 years, not in 1 year, but in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I think access to Global Affairs Canada is a critical step in all this. We need trade minds to look at the present constructs that exist. The Inuit exemptions, the Indigenous exemptions that exist have failed miserably. We should also have Environment Canada involved. We should also have, we've got Sable Island classified as a national park, and we've got gray seals overrunning it. I think, we've put together this strategy and submitted it to the federal government repeatedly over the last decade, and I'll be happy to follow up with this committee following here. We've requested that we formulate a strategy because we've been doing the same thing for 40 years. We've been talking about the seal hunt being sustainable. We've been talking about it being important to culture and tradition, and we've said that the products are pragmatic, the end use is pragmatic. We have not gone so far to position this as an ecosystem necessity, and I believe that's where we presently are, Mr. Kellaway, and I'd really embrace an opportunity to sit down with some trade minds and let them know what happens in our business every day, where we see opportunity, why we can't access that opportunity, because let me make it very clear. It's not that there aren't enough people in this world that want seal products. It's our access to them that's the problem. We've had requests just recently for omega-3 seal oil to America. We get requests constantly from the EU, and we can't service it because people don't understand the reality of the size of the problem we're dealing with.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, how much?
Kellaway,
I guess.
We'll now go to Madam Debian for 2.5 minutes, please.
Very interesting. Let me come back to the emergency action group, which I think would be a very good idea. Do you think it would be viable to think that advocacy groups, animal advocacy groups, could sit on that action task force? Shouldn't we make efforts to restore communication between the extremists? When I talk about extremists, I'm not being negative, but people who fundamentally believe that the wicked people are the human beings destroying the planet. That's true. But when it comes to pinnipeds, maybe it's poor understanding of the situation. And a while ago, you mentioned that it's the ecosystem that's in danger. And that ecosystem, you have the pro-environmentalist and pro-animal rights advocates want to defend the system. Don't you think that it's better to involve them in this? Maybe I'm dreaming. Do you think it can be done?
Oui. Ben, ça peut être les...
It could be people on the other side as well who can answer the question.
Yeah, I firmly believe that extremist groups that don't prescribe to sustainable use of the planet's natural resources should not be included. They're a noise at the table. I believe that legitimate environmental groups who have concern for this and want to see people being able to utilize their local natural resources, whether it's in Pangnatung or in Twillingate, Newfoundland, I think we need to come to the table together to solve a very large problem, one that has tramped on culture and tradition, one that has harmed the environment, and one that is harming the seals themselves.
Yeah. Mr. Shevnosky, I believe that all these organizations would have significant importance on that table as well.
Assuming that you're asking us to elaborate on the same question, in which case, the people that need to be at the table are the indigenous people and the Inuit who've traditionally hunted in this land as well. I think that's and who actually understand a whole of ecosystem approach to managing these ecosystems and doing so effectively. There's a huge benefit to that. That goes, I consider myself an environmentalist, but I certainly believe that the seal hunt is destroying, the seals and the lack of a seal hunt is destroying the ecosystem in this region. So,
okay, thank you, Ms. Barron. I want to give him a chance to give Ms. Barron a chance to ask another question before we close out the first hour.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again to our witnesses. I wanted to provide an opportunity for some of the information that our witnesses from the Arctic Research Foundation wanted to provide to be able to fill in some of those gaps. And if you could elaborate a little bit more on the number one step that you think that the government needs to take, the first step that the government needs to take moving forward. And a side note, I visited Pangnerton, an amazing community up in Nunavut just last summer, and got to see firsthand the cultural importance of seal hunting for Nunavut up in, just incredible. So anything that you can share around that to fill in information that you have not had a chance to, thank you.
the number one thing generally in terms is there needs to be more funding for northern science. That's it. There needs to be more money going out the door, flowing through communities where they can direct it. It doesn't have to come to organizations like us, but it needs to go to the community so they can decide what to do with it. In terms of seals, conducting meaningful stock assessments in the regions, especially in the Arctic, where there's been a huge 18 of the 21 species we don't know what their health is like. That needs to be done. And the third thing is taking this ecosystems approach. Just to give you a quick example, science is expensive, but it can be done much more cheaply. If you're not doing it from a huge icebreaker, if you can actually access these uncharted nearshore regions where the work really needs to be done, where it's been neglected for decades, just for an example, on our ship, on a single project, you could have hydrography mapping for infrastructure and for navigation, while doing bioacoustic stock assessment, while trawling nets to find out microplastics contamination, which is another serious issue, while stopping to do permafrost core samples, and while doing ongoing water nutrient analysis, at the same time training local crew from local communities in Transport Canada certifications to get their bridge watch so they can then get good marine jobs, and also hosting youth camps to engage youth from the communities in local science. This is the model that we do. This is what we scrape together funding to do. There's no reason the federal government can't be doing that. It does cross a bunch of programs. It crosses a bunch of departments. That's unusual, but that's what needs to happen for science funding in the North.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. That concludes our first hour of business. I certainly want to thank our witnesses for coming today, Mr. Hennifer, Mr. Szymanowski, and Mr. Dakins, for sharing your most valuable knowledge with the committee on this particular topic. Delighted to hear the testimony today. It was actually very informing, and we'll suspend for a moment now just to switch out to our second hour. So again, thank you very much for participating. now like to welcome our witnesses for the second panel of our committee meeting today, representing the Fish, Food and Allied Workers Union. We have Dr. Aaron Carruthers, fisheries scientist, of course, by video conference. We have representing the Inter-Quebec Sealers Association, Jill Theriault, director by video conference. And representing the Sport Fishing Institute of British Columbia, we have in person Mr. Owen Bird, executive director, and Martin Page, director, Sustainable Fisheries. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. Each group will have up to 5 minutes for an opening statement. We'll start with Dr. Carruthers, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And on behalf of the 13,000 Fish, Food and Allied Workers Union members in Newfoundland and Labrador, thank you for the opportunity for our union to address the members today with respect to your study on ecosystem impacts and management of pinniped populations. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the FFAW represents fish harvesters all around the island of Newfoundland and in southern Labrador. Our membership encompasses approximately 3,000 owner-operator enterprises, and there are over 7,000 crew members. Our membership also includes thousands of workers in fish processing plants, marine transportation, metal fabrication, hospitality, and more sectors across the province. Now, as the union representing fish harvesters and processing workers, FFAW is an advocate for economic and social growth and sustainability of coastal communities throughout the province. And those coastal communities, vibrant coastal communities, depend, of course, on sustainable and healthy fisheries and fish stocks. And that's what I'm going to talk about a bit today. So that's an overview of the union broadly, but I also want to talk about our science department because some folks may not know that the FFAW has a science department. And our science department began with our Cod Sentinel program in 1994. And one of the goals of the Sentinel program, and it's been one of our main goals since then, has been to bring harvesters their observations and knowledge to the assessment and management table so that they are part of the management of fished ecosystems and fisheries. So in all of the programs we do, and we have programs on every commercially fished stock in Newfoundland and Labrador, plus many other programs, but in all of those programs, harvesters bring their observations, knowledge, and fishing expertise to the table and to the projects. Before I get into my comments, this relates to my comments on seals, but documenting harvesters' observations and knowledge remains an important priority for FFAW. So, and I note here that as part of your study, that this committee has heard from harvesters and sealers in Newfoundland and Labrador and other regions, and including in that, we've got a longtime harvesters who I know well, Mr. Trevor Jones and Mr. Eldred Woodford, who reported on their observations and knowledge of changes in their fished environments. Specifically I expect they would have talked about the changes in the abundance, distribution, and impacts of seal populations in Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, what I'm going to talk about is, actually, before I transition there. So, as you've probably heard, because we certainly have, FFAW has repeatedly highlighted harvesters' frustration regarding the lack of commitment to understanding the impact of seal predation on important species like capelin, Atlantic cod, mackerel, herring, crab, the list goes on. In addition to logged reports of massive seal herds, harvesters have also presented, often directly to DFO, photo and video of seal depredation. And for years, our membership has been calling for DFO to collect information on the current distribution and abundance of populations around Newfoundland and Labrador that are impacting our fish resources. I think it's more than just calling on DFO to document. It's also calling on DFO to prioritize collaborative research on seal impacts, research that builds on observations and knowledge of people on the water. So as you know, I'm sure by this point in your study that there has been a huge gap between harvesters' observations and DFO's assessment of ecosystem impacts from seals. I'm going to walk you through one specific example that I was a part of and just use it to illustrate some of the points that I wanted to talk about. So and this example comes from the 3PS cod assessment and rebuilding plan processes. And then I'm going to recommend potential ways to bridge that huge gap that we have between harvesters and DFO scientists' assessment of impacts. So 3PS cod is one of 3 cod stocks in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's the stock that's located on the south coast of the island of Newfoundland, and it goes from Placentia Bay in the east to Burgeo in the west. So 3PS cod is currently assessed as being in the critical zone, which means that we must put a rebuilding plan in place. So like cod stocks in, in the southern Gulf, the assessment for 3PS cod shows that fishing levels are not driving the trajectory of the stock. In fact, model outputs show that natural mortality is estimated to be 10 times that of fishing mortality, 10 times. And the most recent stock assessment that is available online states, and I quote here, there is a very small population of gray seals that utilizes subdivision 3PS. It then cites a tagging review that was published 5 years ago. But that review, and importantly, the satellite tagging data that review is based on, are at least 13 to 15 years old. So we're making a statement about what's happening on our south coast right now, and we're trying to build plans for how to rebuild a really important cod stock, and we're using data that's 15 years old, and we're saying that there is a very small population on the south coast. This is why people are frustrated. This is an example of why people are frustrated and how big that gap can be. Now, to be fair, I brought this up at the Rebuilding Plan Working Group, which is a small task group of DFO scientists and managers and industry and Indigenous groups. When I highlight the problem of using historic data to infer current status, you cannot infer current status and current impacts from data that is 15 years old.
Ms. Crothers, we're going to have to, Dr. Crothers, we're going to have to cut it off there. We're going over the 5-minute mark.
Okay,
so
sure.
Hopefully, Amy, you didn't get to say, hopefully you'll come out in the questions.
Sorry, my apologies, Chair.
Not a problem. We'll now go to Mr. Theriault for 5 minutes or less, please.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Gilles Theriault. I am Director of Intra-Quebec Sealers Association. I first got involved in this file in 1992, and that gives me a certain long-term vision of this matter. I will not necessarily be presenting a long speech. I listened to other presentations, and this has brought up some points in my mind, and I would like to come back to some of them. First of all, it's important to know that in the seal industry in Canada, you have some Indigenous people who contribute. Quebec provides contributions, the Maritimes and the various regions have their own realities and difficulties. And all this is very important if we need to discuss this issue. There are enormous problems. I've attended many meetings talking to scientists, and I told them that there's no such thing as too many seals. What is important to note is that the number is increasing. Maybe there are other types of animals in an ecosystem. I heard the scientists say that DFO may be downplaying the problem, but that is for sure. The precautionary approach that applies to specific species is an approach of the past. We need an ecosystem-centered approach. We need to focus on this ecosystem approach. And DFO is yet to catch up with that idea. Right now, in the St. Lawrence Gulf, I heard that there are 4 species of fish that are now threatened. This has gone on for many years. There are more than that. You have different types of cod, the white hake, the harang, mackerel, and so on. And in the coming years, there's going to be a lot more species that are threatened. The scope of the problem here in the St. Lawrence region is serious. It's a crisis already. And later on, I could give you more examples of the total lack of willingness by DFO to resolve the problems. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Bird or Mr. Page. I don't know if you're sharing your time with each other or if one of you are making the opening statement for 5 minutes or less, please.
Yeah, thank you. I will do that. I'll just note that I was targeting 6 minutes, and I understand that the statement has been distributed ahead of time. So I'll do my very best, but I'm aware of the time. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee once again. While I will provide the opening statement, we are both prepared to answer questions. The Sport Fishing Institute of BC is an advocacy organization established in 1980, representing the interests of recreational anglers, the businesses that support sport fishing and related activities, and the communities that depend upon it. Salmonids are a keystone species for our fishery, and based on studies and findings in BC, Washington, and Oregon, and shared experience and knowledge of coastal anglers and residents, there is no doubt that the future of salmon and coastal anglers and residents, steelhead production is the future of salmon and steelhead production, and therefore salmon and steelhead fisheries is threatened by the current levels of pinniped predation. Pinniped predation on salmon and steelhead in BC has been a serious issue for decades. And now, pinniped predation is known to have a greater impact on salmon and steelhead production than all other fisheries and harvest combined. From a study published in the Canadian Journal of Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences regarding marine mammal predator consumption of Chinook in Washington state inland waters, the following demonstrates the significance of the issue in waters adjacent to BC. Between 1970 and 2015, the authors estimate that the annual biomass of Chinook salmon consumed by pinnipeds has increased from 68 to 625 metric tons. Converting juvenile Chinook salmon into adult equivalents, they found that by 2015, pinnipeds consumed double that of resident killer whales and 6 times greater than the combined commercial and recreational catches. While pinniped populations appear to have stabilized, the current numbers are 10 times what they were, and the range and habits of the inflated population is oriented to areas and times that are frequented by juvenile and adult salmon. The relationship between pinniped population and decreasing salmonid abundance is increasingly documented and obvious. The future for salmon is bleak unless something is done soon to reverse the trend. Ecosystem-based management that neglects to include pinnipeds in the approach does not lead to rewilding of the BC coast or marine mammals, but has systematically created an exacerbated imbalance in the marine environment. In its natural state, during the millennia prior to European contact, one of the most significant sources of predation on pinnipeds in BC was humans, particularly in those same places and areas where pinnipeds congregate to consume salmon. Indigenous peoples considered seal meat an important part of their diet and made careful use of body parts for clothing and tools. One can look only as far as the UBC Museum of Anthropology to see ancient potlatch bowls the size of canoes intended for sharing this source of rich protein with others. The perception of marine mammals as competition for the commercial fishery undoubtedly led to the actions that have upset the balance between people, pinnipeds, and salmonids. The 1970s total ban on harvest or hunting of pinnipeds in BC was a reaction that, once implemented, modified the ecosystem management approach drastically. The pendulum swung too far, too quickly, effectively removing pinnipeds from ecosystem management, and has led to the present dire circumstances. As many have noted, we are at a crisis level as it regards to the impacts of pinnipeds on salmonid production in BC. Combined with additional challenges due to climate change and habitat loss, many stocks of salmon and steelhead are in threatened or endangered COSEWIC status level. It is our fear and concern that if action is not taken, iconic species such as interior Fraser steelhead, a province of BC study listed pinniped predation as a key source of juvenile mortality, may soon disappear. The significant investment in salmon recovery in 2020 through the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative is taking steps to address salmon recovery in an integrated manner based on the pillars of habitat restoration, enhancement, harvest transformation, and communication. Efforts regarding harvest transformation have ensured that targeted fishing-related mortality is no longer a limiting factor in the productivity of salmon. But absent from the other pillars and PSSI consultation sessions and working groups is meaningful action or even discussion regarding pinnipeds. In what should be an objective, science-driven process that must include all elements of the issue at hand, pinniped discussion is conspicuously absent. While meaningful inclusion of this sensitive and political subject is understandably challenging, ignoring or avoiding it is unacceptable and has the potential to render all other actions ineffective and insufficient. We are encouraged to know that work is underway to restore Indigenous harvest, and we congratulate and support those efforts to the fullest. However, we are concerned that the pace of these efforts will not be enough to address the scale of the problem in a timely manner. Fortunately, and with similarities to SRKW, we can look south at methods and tactics successfully implemented to address the issues and to help restore the historic role humans have played in maintaining a balance between pinnipeds and salmonids. We are hopeful that the object.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. We're going to have the end of the hour to give time for questioning. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll thank all witnesses for being here today. I'm going to focus most of my questions on the West Coast. We've had a lot of testimony regarding the East Coast, so it's great to have some West Coast representatives here. I would ask, could you describe, I know you were in the room earlier today, do you see a similarity between East Coast and West Coast with pinniped populations and impacts on fish stocks?
Yeah, thank you very much, MP Arnold. It was most interesting to listen to the testimony this morning, and at the same time distressing to see absolutely similar situations unfolding in British Columbia that have been unfolding and well documented on the East Coast for what appears to be decades. We're dealing with similar situations in cases I heard of 4 stocks of commercial fish that were facing extinction as a result of pinniped predation. The similarity with interior Fraser steelhead, an iconic species in British Columbia, is there, and I know that you're very well aware of that situation, MP Arnold. So yes, there are definite similarities. I think what's challenging to me as a West Coast representative is to see the length of time that this issue has been discussed and the little action that's unfolded. It's fairly new in British Columbia, and yet it seems to be that we're facing a dire future.
Thank you, and I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention that we're now hearing similar issues on the North Coast as well. So it's all 3 of Canada's coasts that are facing issues regarding ecosystem management, basically because of the disregard for pinniped management in the process. Can you describe both of you, your length of time or the observations that you've had in time? I think you've both been involved with the fishing sector on the West Coast for a number of years. And what have you seen change over time? And we'll try and keep it as short as we can, but I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, it's a short answer to a long time. Agreed. Right from early childhood, I've spent my time fishing on the coast in and around some of these very same environments that are now observing this tremendous basically being overwhelmed by pinnipeds, and this is something that has occurred, through the 90s and particularly now into the 2000s, and here where we find ourselves now, so much so that. There are examples that I can refer to, like in Campbell River, for example. There are angler groups that have been involved in Chinook net pen rearing activities, and they've done that for many years. And recently, they have encountered problems with pinnipeds coming into the river area where those net pens are, and basically the Quinsam Hatchery, which funds and supports that activity, so we won't do it any longer because pinnipeds are interfering with the ability to do that. And so there are many very small and large examples all over the coast where those kinds of things are happening as a direct result of populations of pinnipeds moving into areas and just expanding in such large numbers.
Good. Thank you. You've talked about pinniped predation on steelhead. We've also heard previously about impacts and the pinnipeds will become selective in what species or type they will take. Can they tell? I know you're working on trying to get a mark selective fishery happening in a very limited way and very conservative way. Can pinnipeds tell the difference between a marked fish and an unmarked fish the way harvesters can?
Thank you, MP Arnold. I'm happy to address that question. I can do it very quickly. Just like people, just like southern resident killer whales, and just like other salmon, it's pretty apparent based on my experience in having depredation events occur when I spend my time on the water that pinnipeds cannot tell the difference between hatchery fish or wild fish in any way, shape, or form. Again, similar to other species out there.
Thank you. And have you seen observation of where they may target a male fish versus a female fish, or vice versa, in the returning fish? Any evidence of that?
I don't know if there's evidence of targeting as much as there's evidence of selective what's consumed. Seals and sea lions tend to rip the bellies out of fish and like to consume the roe. We do see species-specific targeting. My experience would be in Cowichan Bay, and it occurs elsewhere, but in Cowichan Bay specifically, sea lions and seals will swim through a school of chum salmon in order to target a coho or a chinook. That's been observed many times.
Very interesting. And how much of the year are these seals and sea lions actually there eating fish, basically? Are they only seasonal, or is it year-round?
They are, opportunistic animals, and so that's part of the problem, is that there's now enough of a population that they're in places where they might have ordinarily appeared seasonally, when they know that the smolts are coming out or the adults are coming in, but now they're there all year round, and then of course they're there in greater numbers at those times in places where they understand that there will be salmon there for them to consume.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. That's right on the mark. We'll now go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be for Mr. Thériault. You are well known in the domain. You recently attended a seal summit in Newfoundland, and you shared your concerns. I agree that such meetings over the past few years have been organized many times. So what has been poorly done? What have we not identified as being the root of the problem? What do we need to resolve this problem of seal population? Thank you for the question, Mr. Cormier. In my opinion, all has to do with a real desire for resolving the issue. When I went to Newfoundland, there were lots of interesting things. We do need the science. I agree with those who appeared before, who said that we have enough science. And we know that the seals eat everything below them, and they are opportunistic, and they would eat whatever they find. We could continue talking about this for 20 years. Even if we talk about exact science, the results are the same. There's too many seals that are causing a problem with the ecosystem. Now, for international markets, it's very interesting for Newfoundland, for the Maritimes and the Quebec regions, a bit less. We already have enough for the market. This year, we were able to hunt 4,000. We wanted 3,000 to 4,000. We only got 800. So we have many challenges depending on the regions, of course. And there was a third topic. I don't remember it. But once again, we always talk about convincing people and informing them on the realities of the seal. I have a communication diploma, university diploma For those who are not believing in it, they will never believe in it. It's like trying to convince a Muslim that Allah doesn't exist, or convince a Catholic that Jesus doesn't exist. That doesn't happen. So it's time for us to get down to action. You talked about science, and I agree that we have a lot of data already. You participated in a scientific harvest that recently ended. What was the objective of getting more data if we already have a lot more? It's difficult to refuse taking part in such events because we always need data. It's always good to have more data. But once again, the problem is not there. The problem has to do with the real desire to act by the government. So if I were to ask you the following questions, because I would like to dwell on this question. You talk about the seal market that you are not able to meet. Other markets are also important, like the lobster market, the crab market. You know that there are lots of threats if ever we do not do things correctly, as you said, when it comes to how we harvest the seal. What do you think? Are we ready to risk everything for other markets that are also just as important? We know that seal harvesting is a problem for the ecosystem. What is really the problem? Because you're involved in it for many years now. If we do not act for the seals, we will not have a market to defend. So any delays in action, because there is intimidation, so to speak, from the United States, I think that this would run us into a wall. Thank you.
Topic, you said that you represent 13,000, I think, FFAW members, fishers, fish plan worker. Again, like, you know, if we do it wrong, we risk to have our market for crabs, lobster, and, you know, other species maybe in difficulty when it comes to our exportation. One of the previous witnesses, I'm not sure if you were listening, said that the U.S. are getting mad right now because of the overpopulation of seal, and some of those seal are getting, I think, to the U.S. what he was saying, and the U.S. were kind of telling us to do something about it. Do you think that discussion should happen at maybe a higher level, whether it's from the Prime Minister office when it, you know, with visit with, you know, with the U.S. president, or maybe like, you know, some minister from trade and DFO to go in the U.S. and say, look, there's a problem here. We want to solve it. We have to do something about it. And here's what we want to do. Do you think that we are at the time now that this is what we need to do? We have enough science. We have enough meeting. Don't you think that this is what we have to do now?
So was that question directed to me? I didn't hear the start.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think yes. I think also to prepare for that meeting, if you had a concentrated group of people that, building off of some of the ideas that Mr. Dion Dakin said, where you had a concentrated bunch of people working together to identify action items and short 3-year timelines, I think you could also strengthen that argument considerably. But yes, it does need to be elevated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
Mr. Thierry, I'm happy to see you at this committee. I am certain that everyone around this table understand the knowledge you've acquired since 1992. You may be as old as my dad. We saw each other in the Magdalene Islands recently, and I noticed that seal harvesting is an integral part in the society there. I wonder, why can't we respond to the demand? Because in Quebec, we have restaurants who want the seal on their menu. We have supermarkets that want seal meat, but we are not able to meet the demand. Is it about lack of training, lack of possibilities, lack of budget? Tell me what you think. There are lots of factors. One of the major factors in the seal industry is the profitability. It's very different from the gray seal. Over the past 10 years, we learned to harvest the gray seal. They had small colonies that are spread out everywhere. So when it's time for harvesting, they are in the shores compared to the harp seal, which always need ice. But for the gray seal, over the past 10 years, they have gotten used to being around the shores in the absence of ice. So we are still trying to understand how to harvest these seals, and to harvest the gray seal in large volumes, it's very difficult. And there's also the lack of training on how to collect seal meat, because people have gotten used to harvesting it for the skin, the hide. This is not consumed. But for the oil and the meat, we need high quality products. So there's a lot of work to do. Unfortunately, I have the impression that we are lagging behind in the St. Lawrence region. We went from 110,000 in population, and now it's in the millions. And we have all these regulations. There are things we can do. We can't hunt or harvest in a certain area. We can't use certain types of vessels. We can't use this or that technique. So the harvesting is becoming more complex. By easing the methods and the working tools used for harvesting, providing training, could recreational harvesting be used to incentivize more harvesters? Because I think that the people in the Magdalene Islands have an approach that's relatively close to what is being used by indigenous people. There's some harmonious cohabitation between the seal and the human beings, and all it represents culturally. I think this is a global asset. Is this something that we could develop further? Absolutely. I think there are lots of red flags. We need to simplify the approaches. Today, we already have difficulty finding seal harvesters, particularly professional ones, because there are lots of amateurs, but we can't change zones. We can't harvest in certain areas. We can't harvest at certain times. We can't use this or that device. So there are lots of regulations. So it's very complicated, seal harvesting. There are things that must remain in place for things to be done correctly, but there are also things that are completely useless. So the entire regulations have to be streamlined. So it's indispensable to understand the ground rules to modify the regulations. Yes, only the harvesters who go on the ground to harvest understand the problem. They are the ones who understand what is artificial that should be removed for there to be a proper management of seal harvesting in the St. Lawrence region. Thank you, Mr. Therio.
Thank you, Madam Devienne. We'll now go on to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less.
Thank Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. My questions, I think predominantly for this round will be to my fellow British Columbians here today. Thank you from the Sports Fishing Institute of British Columbia. My first question is to either that you feel is best suited to answer, but I'm wondering if you can expand a little around how human activity has exacerbated the problem of pinniped predation.
Yeah, thank you for the question, MP Barron. There's several ways where we can look at it. I mean, first off, the complete closure of hunting of seals in the 1970s is what initially created the problem. But we also have other activities taking place. I think perhaps one of the most significant ones that we notice would be the use of log booms. And log booms in the estuaries and bays around systems that produce salmon have created safe haulouts that for seals and sea lions that haven't existed in the past, and has enabled them to successfully avoid predators of their own, such as transient killer whales and things like that. So another thing would be, one only needs to travel down, for example, the mouth of the Fraser River to see the abundance of log booms and the abundance of seals and sea lions on them that can do this. Those would be the two examples that I provide in a short answer.
Thank you very much. My next question is around, you'd mentioned in your opening statements, Mr. Bird, around what's happening down south. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit further around the methods and tactics that you were discussing that were successfully implemented to address the issues. If you can expand on that a little bit further.
I'd say as a general comment that Washington State particularly, and Oregon as well, has observed, as I noted in one of the remarks, noted the problem with quite a bit of care, and they've taken on tackling the issue already. And there are examples, particularly in the Columbia River, where they went to either trapping or just removing, and I'm not sure about the exact details of the removals. However, the evidence has already indicated significant increase in steelhead recovery and passage by those natural pinch points, so-called. They've also taken on different ways and means to consider how to work around the Similar Mammal Act that is in place for Canada. The similar one is in the U.S. And like I say, they initially took on a project to talk about discouraging the animals, and that didn't work. And then we moved on to the next level, and so now they've got to trapping and removal. So there are a number of examples, like as I've mentioned, but they've taken on some tactics that seem to show quite a bit of success in addressing the issue.
Thank you very much. Also in the opening statement, you talked about the fear and concern that if action is not taken, iconic species such as the interior Fraser steelhead, a province of BC study listed pinniped predation as a key source of juvenile mortality. Can you expand on that a little bit more and what that study told us?
Yeah, thank you again for the question. So there are two sources or two times in a salmonid's life when they face pinniped predation. These are typically when they are, and it's all times when they're concentrated. Salmon and steelhead are anadromous species, unlike more pelagic stocks, so they are forced by their lifestyle to migrate through pinch points. One is as an adult, when they're returning as adults. That's the more obvious source of predation, where we see seals and sea lions tossing salmon all over the place. It's quite a horrendous spectacle to see, actually, in some cases, or spectacular, depending on your point. But the other one where they are more concentrated is as outbound juveniles. They have to leave the system in order to hit the ocean. Steelhead are interesting in that they're a stream-type salmonid, so that means that they actually spend 1 or 2 years in fresh water before they migrate out to the ocean. There's common themes in particularly the endangered and threatened Fraser stocks that the bulk of them are stream-type salmonids. What that means is that when they hit the ocean, they are typically in the 200 to 600 gram range, which represents a good, it's the way it's been described to me is it's the difference between a Smartie and an O. Henry in terms of chocolate bars. So for seals and sea lions, they are going to expend the least amount of energy to get the most amount of protein out of the deal. They are going to target these stream-type salmonids. So Many people have looked at it. There's been studies on it. The theme with regards to stream type salmonids being the threatened and endangered species, steelhead being the best example because of their incredibly endangered status. It's pointing towards pinniped predation as being the source of that problem.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to get my last question in quickly here with only 45 seconds left to go. You talked about the ecosystem-based management that neglects to include pinnipeds in the approach and it not leading to rewilding of the BC coast and marine mammals, which of course we had Dr. Treitz that was here in a former meeting speaking to the rewilding process of pinnipeds. I'm wondering if you can expand on that and your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. I think the issue at hand here is that in the 70s we took away pinnipeds from the ecosystem management approach, and we're suffering the consequences of that now. And so to then look at this situation as we find it right now and explain that this is returning things to a wild environment seems to be sort of ignoring what occurred in the 70s and that population.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Small for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for taking part today. My first question is to Mr. Theriault. Mr. Theriault, how are the high deductibles on sealing vessel insurance impacting participation in the sealing industry by your harvesters?
Sorry, can you rephrase deductible?
Deductible is the amount that the harvester would have to pay the base amount on damage to their vessel if they had damage.
Well, yeah, this is a good question because one of the damage of the all the campaign anti-sealing campaign is that it's actually very hard for sealers to get insurance, and the rate of insurance really went high up. But I know, like in Newfoundland, they mostly would hunt harp seal on the ice, so that's tougher, it's a tougher hunt for those people. It's tough on the material as well. Here in the climate change and all, we have barely ice anymore in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So most of the time the guys are going open sea, so we have less problem. The problem we have is to find company who wants to insure sealing activity, because as we know, the big insurance company are either from the state or from United Kingdom. So it's getting really a big problem.
So Mr. Theriault, how could the federal government step in here and help to solve this problem?
Well, definitely, if we could have support from the government of Canada regarding insurance and to make it affordable and possible for the vessels to go out at sea, that would be a huge step already. But that's one of many steps the government of Canada needs to take. But that's certainly an important one.
Thank you. To Ms. Carruthers, Mr. Chair, in the recent mackerel advisory meetings in Halifax, data was provided that gray seals are consuming in the wintertime. These samples were taken. Their diet was 47% mackerel, and we know mackerel is under moratorium. And in the wintertime, mackerel is supposed to be in the Hudson Basin east of New York. So what does that tell us, Ms. Carruthers?
Well, it tells us a couple things. It tells us that we need updated data on mackerel, which is a separate issue entirely. It tells us that we need up-to-date data on where these species are. With mackerel in particular, we are hearing that there is and we're getting a lot of reports that there's a shift in the distribution and abundance. And so that means that it's really important to have up-to-date data on where these species are. The other one is that is a very large removal of mackerel. When right now the commercial fishery has been shut down. I wasn't at the AMAC meeting in Halifax, but I suspect if it's that high of the proportion, then it's going to be more than the removals of even if a commercial fishery was open.
So DFO understands that, and again, Mr. Chair, this question is to Mrs. Carruthers. Gray seals are having a significant predatory effect on the recovery of Gulf cod.
Yes.
How soon do we need to act, Mrs. Carruthers, to save these populations of fish?
Honestly, probably 10 to 15 years ago. And I think we're also just linking, I know Newfoundland better than Southern Gulf. And when you look at the science reports and the stock assessments, what you see is about a 5 to 10 year delay. But throughout the stock assessments, you see the same language coming up when you're talking about South Coast or 4R3PN, that's West Coast cod, Newfoundland West Coast cod, you see the same types of reports coming from DFO that were in Southern Gulf cod, 10, 15 years ago. So we're seeing the same thing happen again, or what looks to be somewhat close to the same thing happening again on the South and West Coast.
So DFO has been holding seals in captivity in St. John's in Newfoundland, Labrador. Have you had any access to the dietary information that's coming out of those studies there with those harp seals?
I think you're talking about the harp seals that are at the Ocean Sciences Center there.
Yes.
I would ask Dr. Carruthers, I would ask you if you could submit an answer to that in writing.
Sure.
Would be great, because Mr. Small has gone slightly over there now. We got to get to another couple of people before we finish off.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to touch on a few points, but if anyone is compelled to provide more information, by all means, do send it in. Mr. Carruthers, is there a chance that we could work with your brothers and sisters in the United States who are also fishing and also, basically facing these same difficulties to try and get a change in attitude by the U.S. government?
I think that when fish harvester groups work together, I think you often come up with some excellent solutions because you have folks who have on-the-water solutions to a given problem. I'm familiar with collaborations that have done things like solve bycatch of turtles and stuff like that, and we've been able to build off of solutions in the States and likewise here. So I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that with this question.
Sounds like a recommendation in the making. Mr. Theriault, the U.S. position, particularly the Marine Mammal Protection Act, is this just market protection or is it their response to all of the advocacy pressures that they're getting?
It's definitely activist pressure. And I'm glad you're asking that question because when you look at the bait file, I mean, recently we have proved that using seal as bait would be great in all aspects. I mean, we could have a better management of seal. We could use, instead of using fish that are depleting for lobster fishing, crab fishing, it would work wonders. We would keep the Canadian money in Canada. We would use our local resources. I mean, the whole thing makes sense, but still, U.S. is putting pressure on Canada to say, oh no, you cannot do that. So it really shows, how we're going off the scale. There's nothing rational about it. There's nothing scientific about it. It's all dogma driven, So I think it's way time for Canada to step up and to say the MMPA just doesn't make sense. Maybe it does, in your land, you do whatever you want south. But here in Canada, it just doesn't make sense. So stop, putting that MMPA in our face just for dogma reason that seal is too cute. Doesn't make sense.
Thank you for that, sir. Mr. Bird, you talked about trapping and removing seals in the Columbia. Is that literally relocating a live animal someplace else?
I know that they've tried a number of things. Like you say, they've sort of had iterative.
I just need a yes or no on this one.
It's remove. Yes, they've tried that, and then they got to removing.
Okay.
Eliminating.
All right. I need you to trade minds with the activists. What motivates them? Where do they get their information from? What do they perceive, and who leads them? You know, what do you know about these people? Well, and Mr. Paish, you know, if you've got something to add.
Yeah. So you mean as it regards to pushing back against addressing this issue that we all share, or we all seem to be landing in the same place?
That's exactly what I mean. Yes.
I can't know because I'm certainly not in that camp. I feel like that I'm reasonably familiar with the issue. However, it appears that the information used by some groups are appealing to urban populations that are not familiar with the circumstances and see a picture of an animal with big brown eyes and are compelled in that way.
Can the Indigenous people be better partners in an effort to change minds?
I think that's an excellent avenue and a very compelling argument for First Nations to help share this information and to have it be adopted more readily than other groups.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we'll let Ms. Debian and Ms. Barron take a little bit of time.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hardy. And we've got about 2 minutes each for Ms. Debian and Ms. Barron, so they can split that time. So I'd ask them to be precise in their question, and hopefully the answer doesn't go on for too long. Madam Debian, for 2 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a good player. I dropped some minutes from my previous intervention. Mr. Terrio, to conclude, we are happy to have you with us. Tell me, what would be your recommendations, your priority recommendations for this committee, things we can include in our report? As I said a while ago, I think it's time for Canada to challenge the MMPA scientifically, not anyhow, but scientifically speaking. That is the first step. Make seal harvesting more accessible. Maintain regulations that are necessary for it to be done appropriately, but make it easier than it is, and encourage initiatives, as is the case with the APA for shellfish. So I think things should be done this way quickly to save fishing in the seas. I am convinced that some things are already possible in Quebec and the Magdalene Islands that is offering fair and equitable equation. So don't you think that the Magdalene Islands should not be a flagship, a positive witness for restoring seal harvesting, something we could use to promote our international market? Absolutely. It's something I've seen over the past few years. If we want to convince people abroad to purchase our seal products, we need to use it ourselves. If we have quality products, be it the meat, the hide, the oils, of course, we could use things like APA and the rest. I went to China in the 1990s. Okay, are you going to pay 25 cents per pound? Now it's $80 per kilo. We need to use the product optimally in Canada ourselves, and then we can go international. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Debian. We'll now go to Ms. Barron to finish it off, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some quick questions to back again to yourselves here. Thank you through the Chair. You'd spoken about the work being taken to restore Indigenous harvests of pinnipeds. I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit, what you're seeing and the movement that's happening around that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We are seeing some investment by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in providing tools and management plans, along with education, to assist local First Nations in dealing with responsible harvest in close to their communities. We'd like to see that work expand. However, as pointed out, the fear is that it's not going to happen quickly enough to address some of the circumstances we're seeing relating to endangered salmon populations.
Thank you. What would you identify as the number one difference between the coasts as we look at pinniped management? I know we talked about similarities, but the difference?
I would suggest that the East Coast is a little bit further ahead. I would suggest that in the West Coast, I noted an Atlantic Seal Action Committee or something like that involves stakeholders. We don't have anything like that in British Columbia. I'd also suggest that, and I'd look forward to talking to one of our witnesses after the committee here, but the idea of developing markets for BC seals and whatnot, I don't think seems to be as far along.
Thank you, and I'm going to try to get one last question because I forgot to set my timer.
Actually, we're all out of time, unfortunately.
Darn it.
I want to say time goes fast when it's so interesting. I realize that, but I want to say a big thank you to our three witnesses, or four actually, for the second hour: Dr. Crothers, Mr. Theriault, Mr. Bird, and Mr. Page, for sharing their information with the committee today, as we look forward to hopefully putting a report together at the end of this and passing it on to government for action. Just a reminder, on Thursday, of course, we will continue our study on pinnipeds. Hope to be there in person and see everybody at that time safe and sound. Enjoy the rest of your day. Meeting adjourned.